So it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Licht, who is a new member of PGA Board of Representatives. We are absolutely thrilled that he's agreed to put together today's late night session. It's the first late night session at Produced by New York. So I'd like to welcome up Chris, who is the exec producer and showrunner of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
I don't know if agreed to was actually the good. I don't think it was presented as an option. Good afternoon, everybody. When I was asked to do this panel, or told to do this panel, I really wanted to get a cross-section of the best that late night has to offer in New York. It's one of them, obviously, I think it's a part of the New York producing scene that rivals the West Coast, if not exceeds it. So I have three people here that I know you're going to enjoy getting to meet, and we have some really good questions planned that hopefully will embarrass all of them. First person I want to bring up is Jen Flans. She's currently executive producer and co-showrunner of The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. And fun fact about Jen, she has worked on The Daily Show under all three hosts. So we'll get into that. Next is Mike Shoemaker. He's been in late night since 1986. First at SNL, then late night with Jimmy Fallon, and now late night with Seth Meyers. And Prashanth Venkataramanujam is the co-creator, executive producer, and head writer for Patriot Act with Hasan Minhaj. All right, just so everyone gets to know you, starting with Jen, can you let us know how you got to where you are?
Sure. I started doing a whole bunch of internships after in my first semester of college, decided I no longer wanted to be a lawyer and let my parents down tremendously. So I started doing internships so that I would avoid going to law school at several, VH1 and One Life to Live. I tried every kind of show, like a talk show, a soap opera, clip shows, just to try and feel out what I liked the most. I decided I liked working at a talk show, something that turned over very quickly. I was always somebody who crammed for exams and papers, so I like to do it real quick and then forget about it. And that's late night. So I ended up at The Daily Show was then just The Daily Show. Craig Kilborn was the host. And I got a PA job there and have, been there for 20 years.
But did you always want to be in TV?
Well, no, I wanted to be a lawyer for battered women and children. I was going to save the world, and then I went into TV. But once I decided, I called my parents first semester of college, and I was like, "You guys, I think I want to work at MTV. I wanted to make music videos or something." And they were like, "Oh, well, that's such a different path."
But we love you anyway.
But I feel like now in political comedy, it's closer to what
You're saving the world.
Saving the world
sure.
a little bit at a time.
Mike.
It's a lot of decades, so I'm going to take that long. I started actually at CBS on 57th Street in the in the stockroom driving a forklift, and I somehow managed to get a job in local news. And then there was I heard about a PA job at SNL, and I went there in 1986, and I stayed there for 23 years, I guess. And then when Jimmy Fallon got late night, I went with him to run that show. And then when Seth got late night, I went with Seth. And those are my three jobs, basically. I've only had three. 30 years of them. 32.
My story is pretty quick.
It just started. That's why. Your story just started.
I did stand-up actually for many, many years. I started doing stand-up when I was 17, and I was on the road. And then I moved to LA and wanted to get into TV, but you can't really make money doing stand-up in LA because it's, you have to be on the road. But if you're on the road, you can't actually write and actually get good at your craft. So I had a day job, and to fulfill every stereotype, I worked in IT. And I wrote, and Hasan and I were writing partners for a long time. I actually met him, I was going to tell you this earlier. We did our first show together at Syracuse in '08.
Wow.
And we've been working together and been close friends for many, many years. And, he pivoted a little bit from stand-up to do more storytelling stuff. I pivoted from stand-up to do, more writing stuff. And I worked on the Bill Nye show for Netflix. We did the Correspondents' Dinner. Before that, we did the Radio and Television Correspondents' Dinner, which is basically like the JV version of the Correspondents' Dinner. And then 2 years ago, we started working on the concept for Patriot Act, and and that's how, why I'm sitting here.
What'd you get your degree in? Was it television?
I got a degree in molecular and cellular biology. I've lived many lives. I've done a lot of different weird trajectories. Weirdly, my cellular biology degree is what pushed me over the edge to get the Bill Nye writing job, so I could tell my parents it actually helped me get a job on TV. Bill loved the fact that I had a degree in science. Yeah.
Is there anyone, and I throw it out to all three of you, is there anybody that early on in your either driving a forklift or being a PA that stands out as they took a chance on you? That without this person, you probably wouldn't have gotten to the next level. Someone that saw something in you and how you nurtured that and developed that.
I'll say back in '86, there was the person who was in charge of the PAs and who, this was a different time. Only women had that job. It was like a girl's job. And I said, oh.
I had that job.
Yeah, right. We were script PAs, and the job was to take scripts and type them out for people because the men couldn't do it. So and it was a super sexist system. I said, can't a guy have this job? I can actually type. I do not. I learned how to type. And she said, I don't know, this would be really weird. And she actually said, but you seem nice. And she gave me that job. And it afterwards, people said, oh, there's a guy in there now. It's weird. It was actually a problem. But she let me have it. And then I managed to stay and
it would be awesome
get
if Mike
that.
just went into a reverse racism rant.
Here's the thing.
It was
Guys don't get anything out of it.
Yes, women are known for dominating late night.
You wait, we will.
She did really well, by the way. That's so God bless.
I mean, Jon Stewart, but
I've heard of him.
He took a chance on me. I feel like I kind of earned my street cred at the show, doing a lot of just PA work, always, very, whatever job I was given, I wanted to do really well, even if it was ordering lunch for the crew. And John really was like, I was a production coordinator, and he was giving me things to do that were way above my pay grade, because he's just like, you could do this. And I was like, okay. And bringing me into meetings in the writer's room, all of a sudden I was going from just doing production things, girl things, right, to being in the meetings where we're coming up with the show. And so that changed my career trajectory there completely.
Yeah, mine's pretty simple. Two people, my manager, who basically, when I was early on doing stand-up, he was just like, hey, I think you're onto something. And for 10 years, he's been my manager through all the transitions, and he's been great. And then Michael Natus, he produced, it was an EP for Craig Ferguson for many, many years. And then he was a showrunner for Bill Nye. And he really went out on a limb to hire me, which was, I'm forever in his debt.
I think it's interesting, a lot of times when you talk to people, particularly on The Daily Show, who worked with John, it's like John this, and John saw this, and John really ran that show.
Oh.
And anybody that knows anything about the Late Show, that was one of the problems, is that Stephen was running it at a much larger scale than the Colbert Report, and that was one of the issues that we had to divest of. But talk about, I think, at your show, the talent is running it. Yes. Is that the case with the two talent you've worked with, and how about yours?
I mean, I will say that Craig didn't. We had showrunners that were the showrunners when Craig was the host. John came in, John ran the show. And Trevor took over for John, so we were in the habit of the host running the show, and we were like, Trevor, you got to be the boss. And he's stepped up. He's so great. But he runs it, and the talent is, I think it's important for the talent to run the show.
I agree. I think that matters. I think that both Jimmy and Seth, they're different. I mean, on paper they're the same person, but in reality they're very different. I mean, they're both two white Weekend Update guys who got late night on NBC, but they are very different. But they both come from that same tradition of very collaborative running. But I feel like everything goes through like every decision I make. Seth and I sit in a room like all day and just kind of, I say, what should we do this? And then we like go back and forth. But I wouldn't do anything without him. I think that he, and Jimmy was pretty much the same way. I think they really kind of have to run it because they're the ones who have to defend it and stand up for it.
I always say to Trevor, when he started, I was like, your name's on it, it's your face, it's coming out of your mouth. I want you to be able to feel confident about what you're doing. And you know, obviously he works, there's a few of us that help run the show, but really, at the end of the day, final decision, host.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like what I've found, you know, in the last year that we've been working on this is because late night is such a quarterback's medium. You know, it's so dependent on this person that is helming the ship that they need to sign off on everything. However, we're in a position where we're starting up a new show, and there's so like the amount of decisions that need to be made in any given week is so high, and it slowly trickles down, but it stays at a steady state of just like a ton of decisions per minute. So our approach has been like make sure that the big decisions get sign off from our talent. And then
I'm like, should we tell him that never stops? It's not the show just started.
Maybe it'll never go down.
It never goes down.
I do think it's healthy though if they have a sense of things that they let go of. Like there were things like Seth doesn't care that much about. Like we had a set that we just like rubber stamped and we had to scrap after a while because somebody said that set looks terrible, but we didn't occur to us to like there. So there were things that like I know like Stephen picked the colors on that set.
Allegedly.
It's a great like urban folklore, but I think like when they get rid of things, like there are things that I'll say, well, I'm just going to change this on the rundown, or people say I'm just going to change this script and you can see it on cards, and when they kind of let that go, it makes the day a lot better. It's very helpful for them, but in the end they have to give a lot of trust to everybody because it is them. It's ultimately them.
Yeah.
How do you navigate as a producer when you see something differently than the host?
I generally say it because I feel like I've had that relationship with Trevor and had it with John, and I feel like if you pick your battles and you're not doing it all, if you're not being contrarian all the time, they trust that if you're saying, I don't see it this way, but at least the two guys I've worked with in this capacity, really, there were times I disagreed with John, told him I disagreed, gave him my reasons. We did what he wanted. Anyway, it's his show. And then if it didn't go right, he always looked at me and goes, I know, don't say it. And I'm like, I don't know. But for the most part, I feel like if you're not doing it all the time, they're like, oh yeah, and sometimes, they're human. They can't see every single thing. I'm like, this might be a bus waiting to hit us. Like, don't say this thing. This is not a good joke to make. I know in the room it seems really funny, but when this gets out on TV, it's just not going to sound that way. And generally, it's very well received. Like, oh, we didn't see that.
I bet that you and I are similar, that you were really good friends with Hasan. And Seth and I, so when we disagree on something, it's always like, why don't we agree on this? Like, we mostly are in sync, and when we don't, when we're not, we're like, oh, we should look at this, because it's odd that you don't feel the same way that I do. And then when that happens, to the delight of my staff, we bicker like an old couple. And I was thinking the other day, I said, aren't you going to practice that thing? He's like, no, I'm just going to try. I'm like, you're going to fuck it up. and the staff just like loves it to see like mom and dad fight. It's the best. But we do it like really out loud and kind of have a good time with it. And then afterwards, it's fine. And I bet when it's really based on a friendship, I bet that it's similar.
Yeah. See, I mean, we've all worked especially you guys are doing, like, the closer looks are really great, and you guys are doing these long form pieces where you're, like, analyzing the news, and that's what, obviously Stephen's doing to a large extent, and that's what Trevor does. I try to keep my battles to the argumentation, right? Because the pieces we're doing on Patriot Act are these longer form pieces that require, like, making sure you're buttoned up on facts and making sure that you're coming correct, because you will get eaten alive on the internet if you're wrong. And it also damages the credibility of the show. So when it feels like there's a tasteless joke being made, usually everybody senses it. Yeah. But we really bicker about argumentation, because I sort of see my job as the producer and the head writer to protect him from making sure he doesn't step into potholes. Because a lot of times you don't want some small point to draw all this attention away from the larger thing that you're trying to say. And that's usually the hills that I try to die on, because these long form pieces take so long to put together. So that's kind of.
How about you?
Yeah.
Well, Stephen and I never disagree, so it's very.
Same brain.
It was different because he literally, when I came on, for those of you who don't know, I came on about 6 months after the show launched, with zero, and I mean zero, experience in late night, which was helpful, really, because I walked around and said, well, why are you making this? Why is this decision? Why are you in this meeting? This seems very strange to me. Because in news, it's just their name is not on the building, so it's a very different formula. But he really relished the fact of pushing things onto my plate and off of his, because it allowed him to do what he loves to do. So the way it generally goes is anything he doesn't want to deal with, he doesn't deal with, and the things he's still interested in dealing with, he does. And that, I feel like that's kind of how it should be. And we've had very few disagreements, but you do feel like you owe it to him to be honest, because the rest of the staff takes that cue. And I think you guys would all agree, where shows get into trouble is when there is a lockstep groupthink where people are afraid to speak up. You'll see something in rehearsal, and everyone kind of looks around, and who is going to be brave enough to say something? And if you don't have a culture where someone can speak up and say, hey, that just struck me the wrong way, well, that permeates through the rest of the organization, and people are afraid to speak up when there are problems. So we have a whole reporting structure so that people don't feel like you're taking on Stephen when you raise your hand to say that there's something that you don't like about either the way the show's being managed or something that's going to be in the show, because it takes a lot of courage. Even I run the show, and it takes courage for me to go, hey, that doesn't seem,
Well, I'm curious, actually, what we're talking about, and if you guys have this experience, I don't know quite how it runs. On our show, we have a dress rehearsal every day, basically. We bring in an audience we bring in like an audience of like 40 to 60 people that are basically shopping around NBC, and they're in the store, they're looking at the tree, and they're almost 100% foreigners. Like Seth has to ask, and it's who here's from out of the country, and it's every hand. But it's super helpful, and he does all of our jokes and the closer looks, and pretty, like, any sketch that isn't overly complicated in front of that audience. So any of that stuff that you're talking about kind of gets, like, it gets fleshed out there, and we will say, like, well, we'll try it and see if the audience gets it, or hates it, or like if it's a laugh, but it's like a weird laugh. So any arguments kind of end there. That happens at like 4:30, and we tape at 6:30. So that's when you know. So I feel like for us, we don't have to speak up as much as the audience does, and it is super helpful that these people from Denmark have an opinion, but they all do.
Yeah. We do. We do the rehearsal in front of the staff.
Yeah. That's what we do.
Largely because I feel like it's safer, where you can take bigger risks because then no one's going to tweet about it.
True. We have that problem. We have, like, so far no one's busted us on that. Like, no one has come and visited and then tweeted about it. But we always presume it's going to happen.
And Jimmy does the same thing, right? Jimmy.
Yeah, we kind of started it at Jimmy. It's all like, because we're Like you guys are all Daily Show descendants, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's like it's a system.
Yeah,
The
it
system
is.
that you
It's like
have
you
is very
guys-
different,
right.
and we're all SNL descendants. So we
Right.
believe like we only live on dress rehearsals and stuff like
Yeah.
that. All of the things that we do are based on that. And
I also think being situated in 30 Rock makes
Yeah.
it like us getting an audience to 11th and 52nd
Yeah.
every day, and then another one. No, that would be, yeah. I do, but it is funny. It's funny to see descendants of like the SNL, the Lauren world, and the John world.
yeah, there's I think that just the way you guys do scripts, like I think you all do them the same, and we like you all have this. What is that thing called?
Scripto.
Scripto. People say like, what do you write on? I'm like, computers. Like you guys work on like a specific program that Stephen invented, right?
He does own the software company, yeah.
Yeah. That allows everyone to get into the script, and
That was one thing I knew I was not going to change.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of this software that
No,
you own and created.
I mean, people that use it love it,
Yeah,
and
no, it's great.
ours is so archaic that it
Why
like
don't you use Scripto?
no, because we're just used to it. But people like
This is
scribble on
because
it.
you were like nervous about divulging a conflict of interest, and then you turned into a pitchman immediately.
So you guys, there's some script. You can buy the app. Say you know Chris.
20% off.
Oh, no. So what's it like on the streaming world? What's that like? How's that? I mean, you have no... I mean, you're considered a late night show, but I don't know why, because it could be at any time. You can
Completely agree.
and you have no ratings.
We have no ratings.
You have no lead-in.
Chris means literally no one is watching our show.
But
You have,
they
you have no
never tell
ratings
you,
that
right?
anybody
Yeah, we
cares
have no
about.
It's a
ratings.
secret, right? They will
It's a
never
secret.
tell you.
They will never tell us.
Do they tell you?
No.
So you have no idea
We
how
have
an
no
episode
idea.
goes.
We have no idea. Yeah. I mean, there's so much I could say, so I want to make sure, like,
I think people here would be interested. Let me speak on behalf of all of you. Would be interested, like, what is it like? We are from the traditional world.
yes.
You are.
I'm from basic cable, so that's different.
But you're a Netflix person.
Yeah.
What does that look like that's different that we couldn't even imagine?
Do you all live together?
That's right. The stranger, yeah, they live in our building, actually. I think one thing that's been very interesting from the inception of the show to, because we've shot a proof of concept and then took that out. Like Hasan and I just produced it and then made it, which is very risky. Like anyone in TV will tell you, like, never do that. But yeah, so we made a proof of concept. We sold it. And we realized, like, it can't really exist in a world where there are commercial breaks because of these long form segments. But it presents all these interesting challenges. Like the way I've kind of settled on what we're doing is we're not making a TV show, we're making a Netflix show. So much of the decisions we have to make about our show are driven by the platform we're on. And I think that's going to continue to be the case as streaming becomes more popular, and people want sort of, VOD and stuff. Like, for example, I'll give you, obviously, if you guys have seen any parts of the show, we do these long form segments, much like Last Week Tonight, and they really pioneered that. And part of the reason they were able to do that is because of HBO. They were on a platform where they weren't broken up by commercial breaks, and we had a similar thing. The other issue we were running into is that because the HBO still airs, like they still have an airtime that they're trying to hit, they open with topical stuff, right? They'll recap some smaller stories and then they'll do their main story. For us, because we are on demand, there was a lot of choices about how do we open our show, because so much of what's viewed on Netflix and on streaming is like, hey, I want to go back and watch something. And unfortunately, comedy in general ages like bread. Like you need context for a lot of the jokes you're making. And this is a problem all shows have, where it's like you don't just go back and watch something from last year and you're immediately dialed into what the context of the situation was. So it just became a problem of what do we start the show with? And then we just kind of decided we have to start with our stake. We have to open with the thing that we don't want to add this barrier of entry to our show where you have to watch all these jokes about something that you have no context for anymore, and then you get to the piece that maybe people are like, oh, that's the main story that I was recommending you. So Like that's, for example, like one of the challenges and one of the decisions we made with the show based on the streaming platform.
So what does success look like? You know, I mean, we get overnights. We get, you know, we have data that will say, hey, we thought this was a good show. Oh, America agreed or didn't agree.
Yeah.
What does success look like? How do you know that you had a good show other than you like it?
I think we honestly have no idea.
We don't have any idea either, if it makes you feel any better.
I don't think that we do.
We don't pay that much attention to rating. I mean, I'm sure people at Comedy Central do, but within the show, and I think it's probably the same, and it's probably I think it's a healthy way to make the show is not to pay that much attention to ratings. In order to build the voice of the show, I think you have to just see what feels good for the show. Like if you left feeling like you had a good taping and it was a good show, then that's a good show.
Yeah, I do think it's the best. It is a really good way to build the show in that kind of vacuum. Like there are, sitcoms that work that way where
Seinfeld tanked the first year.
Yeah, or they were on, like they shot a bunch of things and didn't hear people on Twitter complaining about them. They had them in the can and that's similar to what you have. You make them a little in a vacuum and then at the end of the year, someone will view it on the whole and say, oh, this is great, this is what I like about it. And you don't have to course correct until you have your legs, which is, I think, great. Also, it's so interesting the way that your show, like you say that it's a little based on John Oliver, but John's show so much is based on your show because he doesn't have commercials, but he makes them. He makes them and puts them so he can breathe.
Right.
Because he looks like he's gonna, after a while it's like, and now this. He just can't. He can't keep going. So So you're so clearly the next generation because you're existing in that other different way. You're like in that odd spaceship that's kind of going on its own in a great way.
We are a monkey shot into space for sure. I think the other thing that we're slowly figuring out with the show is, streaming. I mean, like it just presents all these challenges that you don't anticipate in the
what are some of them for people who might want to produce for Netflix?
I mean, the sort of black box of it is you just don't know. Like you're just trying to make a thing that's good and then it goes up and you're hoping that it resonates and it has an impact. I think, unfortunately, we rely, not unfortunately, it's just a fact that the matter is that we rely heavily on what's happening online and how people are responding to the show. And because we're not airing and we don't have that initial burst, people are just kind of watching the show over the next 3 days and we're kind of seeing the feedback trickle in. And we do pay attention to it because I think because we are an internet show, like we don't broadcast, it's just being put up on a website basically. It's important for us to have that interplay between our online audience because they are the ones watching our show. That's how they live on the internet. That's how they know to watch the show. So
are network notes creative based or algorithm based?
Oh, you're trying to get me in trouble, Chris.
No.
Yeah,
because I will get ratings based notes. So
that's true. Yeah. So the algorithm plays. It's interesting. I mean, they too. I mean, Netflix in working with them, they too have been figuring out how they want to plot their path with our show and some of the other shows that have come before us. Things like the tile, that you see. I mean, you guys would not imagine. You couldn't imagine how much A/B testing goes into what makes you click on a show. They'll basically create a show and you guys have your look at the show, but then for us, they'll create literally 20 different tiles that will be presented across, all of Netflix. They go, oh, we know this person likes bright colors or this person responds to this kind of thing. I mean, it's that. So that we get notes based on that in terms of how the show is presented. But in terms of the content, the actual content that we do, they keep them pretty creative in terms of, we like this content, we like the direction it's going in and all that stuff. But they don't try too much to go, the algorithm is telling us this, so you should do this topic. Yeah.
Getting back to show running, I direct this at you not because you're a white dude, but as someone who's been in this area since 1986, how have you seen the evolution of the importance of diversity and inclusion change and evolve, and where is it now versus when you started? And how do you guys, as people that do the hiring, how do you make that work?
I mean, it's always been super important. It's by the way, it's a lot easier now. It used to be where you would where as a producer you'd have to get creative in order to find, because you wouldn't have candidates that.
What I was going to say. We used to only get resumes from white guys.
Yes. So at SNL, there were whole seasons where we had no women submit, or like 2, and so the creative way to do it, that you would go and see performers and convince them to become writers. Like there was in '95, there were like 4 women who were like in Second City and in Second City Toronto and the Groundlings, and we said, "Oh, you're really funny. Would you like to write?" And I had to talk to, you know who Paula Pell is? She's brilliant. She's and I had to say, "Hey, listen, I think you should do this." She goes, "No, I'm an actress. I don't want to do this." Like, no, but we can tell from the way that you do improv that you will be amazing at it. And you know, she wrote Sisters last year. I mean, she's one of the best writers to ever come out of SNL. But we had to talk her into it. So you have to be active, is what we found, and it's the same racially. Like there were years that you did not get any diverse candidates. Now it really is. It's you'd have to be actively a dick to not have a diverse show. You'd have to go out of your way. It's a great time because there were so many good diverse candidates with a lot of experience, and then some that you could just tell are really funny that will fit in great.
And I actually think in like 10 years from now, it's going to be even easier because I think when I was growing up, I'm watching Conan and watching, you know, like you're watching a lot of white guys on TV. And so my guy friends growing up, like in the burbs, like all wanted to be comedy writers. And now I think because there are faces like Hasan, like Sam B, like Trevor on TV, that there are more people that'll identify with them and more people that'll then want to go into comedy and see it as an option. And that doesn't just mean being the host, but it's all the jobs. I mean,
Yeah.
we did the same thing. We used to have to go, when I ran the internship program and hired the PAs,
Yeah.
you used to have to go to college. We'd go to like the HBCUs and, hey, can we, any candidates you want to work in TV, like send me all of the resumes. And just actively looking for people that might even not think of working in TV, but then
it's a little because they didn't have examples to follow.
Exactly.
So
and I think now
you
they
have
do.
to tell them, oh, we want this. So I mean, and then we have a very diverse staff. I know all of you guys do. I think that. But I remember when it was an issue for a long time, and it's really an issue when you have a long-running show. Where like you started in the 70s when there's only white guys and there's little turnover, and then you have like one slot and you have to make a point of it. The best thing is when you're starting a show where you get to pick a rainbow of people, and again, if you don't do it that way, there's clearly something wrong with you because the options are there.
It's interesting. I think I was actually in this building at a conference, a DealBook conference a couple of years ago, and Melody Hobson gave a very pointed speech about this to a room full of very successful white CEOs. And basically she said, we're working on it is no longer acceptable. That has been acceptable for 10 years or so, but now we're working on it is no longer okay. And I think you're feeling that at every level of the organization, including the people on your staff. I think the challenge for legacy broadcasts, where you do have people who have been around for a long time, is you can't just suddenly go out and hire more people because you want a diverse workplace. It doesn't work that way. So it has really gotten into kind of weeding out mediocrity, and not giving those people the benefit of the doubt anymore, and instead getting some new blood in and setting them up to succeed. And for someone like you to start a show, you have a blank canvas. And did you find that it was a challenge? That it was how when you staffed up your show, how was it getting candidates from different backgrounds? And I would also add, not just gender, not just race, but also thought.
Yes.
Some conservatives
Yeah.
maybe.
I will say, even, I'll try to be succinct, but when Hasan and I worked on Correspondence Dinner, that was, we had a team of writers that was helping us, but we didn't, a lot of times, like, they're hiring people that are hosts of shows, Seth Meyers, Stephen Colbert, people that, have a bench that's pretty deep, that they go, okay, we got to do this along with the churn of the show. And we had to like staff up, and we made it a point there are a couple writers that we had that we were very thankful for that are pretty conservative, that made sure that we...
Doesn't one of them work at my show?
That is true. That is true. And he's a friend, yeah.
Yeah,
and
he's great.
He's really funny.
Good to have diversity of thought in the room.
It is. It really is. Because there are blind spots. And I think when I hear diversity, I mainly think of what are the blind spots that even Hasan and I, as brown men, have. We have tons of blind spots to the experience of brown women and black women that we also need to make sure that we're covering our bases. Like, me being a brown dude doesn't automatically just check some box that just, hey, you guys are good to go. You know what I mean? It's not that. Like, we too have like these, entrenched vantage points that we need to compensate for. And so that is one of them, and that writer really helped us make sure that and I think the strength of the speech in that particular for that particular instance was bolstered by him being like, you guys are just going into lefty Lefterson insanity, and don't say that. That's just stupid. Like, because this is the point. Like, you're gonna undercut the main point you want to make by making this joke. And he was astute enough to go, I like where you're going, just you don't have to get there with this route, and it protected us, especially because Hasan is a well-known Muslim man, so like him saying some of these things is going to come with an intense amount of backlash that his white counterpoint may not face, because just people are like, why am I hearing someone shit on my president from this perspective? But then getting back to the show, I think for us, we, and this is very much so at the guidance of Jim Margolis, which I'm thankful for, blind submissions. That was very helpful.
That started at the Daily Show.
Yeah, that was very helpful because it just eliminates, and we really, really stuck to like a numbering system where we didn't know who was submitting. We made sure we couldn't indicate gender or background or name or anything, and it just helped us make sure we were screening the funniest candidates first, and then we were looking at how we were going to staff up. And
but isn't the key to that making sure that pool?
Well, I was just going to say, we had to Steve Bodo, who's a co-showrunner with myself right now, he came up with it when he was head writer, this thing where we don't look at any of the names, they all get numbers. And then we realized only when Trevor was there that basically there are many more white men that have reps than anybody else, right? So your blind submissions are like 80% white men, like 20% everything else. So at some point we had to say to the reps, don't send us any white men for this round. For this round, we'll do blind submissions, all women, only women. Because I think at some point it is systemic. It's not just saying we're not looking at race, gender, whatever is great, but also some of those people that you want on your writing staff or as producers or whatever don't even have the means to know how to get their stuff to you.
Exactly.
So so making a conscious effort, like you said, like going out to the clubs and like being like, that guy got talent, bring him in, and he's different than all the submissions that we got.
It has translated to reps, and we don't deal with them, but they will say, like, I have a diverse candidate, because they know that networks have made this a priority. And I feel like NBC, I mean, back when I was at SNL, I remember that being an issue. And that, I don't know, like that could be 15 years ago, where they, like, you have to have more diverse candidates. We will help you find them. We will help you financially if you get that. Like, they made incentives. I presume that everybody does. And that's something that they keep track of. And so therefore, because they made incentives, agents knew they could sell them, so they would go, and then agents would start going to clubs and signing diverse candidates. So compared to a lot of industries, I feel like we've started. It's obviously not perfect, but I don't know anyone who does not want that to work out.
I think the other thing, and now seeing it on this side, I want to add to all this is that because people are taking in the media, they go, oh, I want to be like Hasan Minhaj, I want to be like Seth Meyers, I want to be like Trevor Noah. You do need a pool of people that do want to go, I want to be a comedy writer. I want to produce. I want to be the brown, the Indian Shonda Rhimes. I want to be that version of it. Like that is now that people are becoming so media savvy, it is cool to be the Kenya Barris that gets the friggin' $100 million Netflix deal. And people need, I think it has to be both things at the same time. People that are doing the hiring need to make sure their applicant pool from the get-go is a diversity round. Like that's just what it is now. But on the other side, there needs to be more encouragement amongst immigrant families, Asian families, black families to go, this is a viable career. People can make, livings off of this, and you need to go for that. Like
even if your degree is in molecular biology.
That's right, yeah.
So you've all, at some point, either launched or reimagined a show. What is the biggest mistake that you wish you could do over again? Either in a talent transition or, launching Seth or launching your show?
Well, we only had 5 weeks between John and Trevor, so that we could have used more time. But I know the network didn't want to lose like the Daily Show viewer being off too long. But I think I think one thing we did right was that Trevor didn't read a lot of the press and didn't get caught up with it, which some of us did, me. And I was still like, it throws you off when you go from being on John's show, which is like this, TV darling, just like people loved him, he's beloved. And then to Trevor taking over, and we knew he was amazing and smart and talented and a new voice that was going to be great, but also that people would compare them for a very long time because he was sitting in John's seat. And I think the one thing that would have, we kept a lot of the staff because there was 5 weeks to transition, and because we that were there knew how to make the show. And also, I said we plucked Trevor from Africa, and he came and he didn't know anyone, so we had a whole staff for him, which was great for our staff because people kept their jobs. But I do think that everybody there was in the mindset of making John's Daily Show, and it's very hard we put Trevor at the desk making John's show. And I think over time we've been able to make a Trevor show. I mean, I think if you watch, 2012 John, 2012 John and 2018 Trevor, the show's very different. The voice of the show is very different. But I think in 2015 December, we were still, finding our feet, and, people that worked for John, making John's show for a very long time, are now making Trevor's show and trying to get an episode on every, 4 nights a week. And you just kind of are in this groupthink of what John would do. And that was, I think it took us a little while to steer into what Trevor would do. And so that would be, I think more time in a transition might be helpful, just to kind of learn your new host and decide how to make the show differently.
Starting Seth's show, probably the only, I think all of these shows, the mistakes are built in on purpose. Like you have to go through that.
Yeah, I don't know, we found out Trevor's show without the audience.
Yes, Trevor had to go through, there was no way that, John was beloved. That's it. And luckily, Comedy Central had patience, and you guys were smart enough to know that this show can be imagined by several people. I think patience is really the biggest issue in all of these shows, that you have to have a network. Netflix should have had more patience with Michelle Wolf, and Robin Thede show should still be on, and Wanda Sykes show should be on now instead of
It's hard for a talk show host.
It takes a really long time. It's a little easier with a legacy situation like we have. It's super hard for you guys, but honestly, because Netflix has done it. But just to your question, the one mistake that we did make was that when we started. Seth had only been behind the desk, and we said, we can't open that way. That's the way the other shows open. Those guys all open that way. He can walk out. I've seen him do it. He has legs. He doesn't have to sit behind a desk. So we went for a whole year and a half, and then really one weekend, it was in the middle of the summer, And we said, well, why don't we just try it? Like, no one will know. It's August. Like, we didn't think anyone would notice. We'll just do it Monday. Like, let's not even, like, we decided on Thursday to do it Monday.
Was it your idea or Seth's?
It was a lot of people's suggestion that we fought, honestly. And then we said, like, no, he can't. And then it wasn't so much, it was just, like, we acquiesced. But it was a lot of people had brought it up. It wasn't really either of our ideas. It was our idea to have him stand, because I had seen him do, the ESPYs and the correspondence. Like, I know that he could walk out and hit a mark and do that. And then we said, well, why don't we just try it, just because it was the middle of the summer. That's when you do shit.
I can't even tell you we had the same desk standing. I don't know if you remember, there were a few months where Trevor stood.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're like, well, he's not comfortable at the desk, and he's
Why don't we try it? Also, why don't we just try it?
Right, and then it was like, oh, no, he's got to go back.
But there's nothing wrong with trying this stuff. So,
Right.
And then when we tried it, we're like, oh, yeah, this is better. I mean, it also allowed different kinds of jokes, and, the graphics is more that he was suited to. So, but I think we were a little stubborn, probably because of you guys. It's your fault. No, but we didn't want to. We said, oh,
Have the same show. Yeah.
those shows are like that, and we didn't know we were going to be political. Also, we didn't. I didn't think we had the resources.
Who knew?
Yeah. Something happened.
So you really can't answer this question until next year when you come back and do this panel.
It's true,
because
yeah.
You don't know them. You don't know what you've screwed up so far.
That's actually very true. The only thing I can say is this is one thing we knew going into it, and this kind of again gets back to like producing for streaming, which is it's just a different beast in that people say late night leads a lot of time to get on its legs, but when you're on streaming, you don't have that luxury as much, mainly because it is the algorithm, it is the way people are consuming TV now. They're just making decisions really quickly about what they like. So we knew going into our first weekend that people pretty much decide if they're going to watch your show in the first 3 or 4 minutes. And you're having to come out of the gate that you have to come out very, very strong to make sure that people know essentially that you're not going to waste their time. I mean, that was like the ethos of our show of just like, hey, let's just get to what we know how to do well and just make sure viewers know that we're going to give them the most amount of value we think we can provide, and then just get out of their lives and hope that they come back to us. So for us, like, we were very resistant to doing a ton of test shows up top, but we were convinced to do them, and that helped immensely because our show is just, there's a lot of cues, it's very complicated, and that helped us hit the mark in terms of like us having a strong opening.
I want to, for people who may be in the audience and are digging you guys and want to have your jobs, what is a piece of advice you'd give to somebody that they probably haven't heard as to how to break into this world, how to make it in this world? Also, I'm interested in, is there specifically how you make it in the world of late night, specifically as a woman? Break in and
yeah, I'm like, I don't, I think, and I tell all the women that work for me on staff, just like, think of yourself as a person. Don't think of don't make it a man-woman thing. You walk in that room and you have the right to say anything anybody else, can say. And I think that I'm really lucky. Like, my parents were I was the oldest of 4 kids, and I was a girl, and my dad played sports with me, and my mom, did all the girl things, all the arts and crafts, everything. And so I didn't know that you couldn't do things if you were a girl. I was brought up like pretty much to just be like, you're very encouraging parents. And so I was lucky, but I'm trying to import that on the women that work for me, because I think that it comes from seeing a strong role model, and I think that that's how you get more women to speak up in the workplace. And I think that for advice for how to get in, I think you have to love it. And if you don't, and I mean, I know that's so generic, but you have to love it. It's a lot of hours, and you're there all the time. And if you're not there physically, you're there mentally. You're on a text chain, you're on an email chain, you're constantly making the show, especially when it's, so many, 4 or 5 nights a week. And you guys know that. You have to love doing it, or your staff will feel it. I think people know when you enjoy working there, and the environment that you create is based on how you feel. And I one of the things I love about our show is that it feels like people want to be there. And I mean, I know I've heard that about your guys. I know Stephen. I know that's how your show runs, and I can't imagine that everybody's not having fun with Hasan because he's the best. But I do think you have to really love what you're doing, and because it takes over your life a lot.
I would say that, this is something that we tell, like Seth and I do a thing with our interns every semester, and we like just answer questions, and it's always like, and the main thing you say is like you have to be if you want to work at these shows, you have to be in a community that feeds these shows. So like, if you're in New York, if you want to be in comedy, you should know everyone. You should be at the UCB or the Magnet or whatever the other one is called. The Pit. And you should go to those places, and you should be in a community so that when one of them gets hired, they say, oh, my friend, we hired Amber, and then we don't have openings very often, but when we had one, she said, my friend Jenny Hagel, like, hire her. I worked with her this one place. That's how it happens. That's how
we've gotten a bunch of writers.
Yeah, it is. It's almost always that way. So these things all are like extended family. The way, in some ways, I'm jealous that you guys have that Daily Show family. We have that SNL family, and I think that we all, we draw from that, you draw from yours, and you all kind of pull from the same pool. So someone that winds up on your show, their friend is on your, our writers know each other in general, because they went out of their way to do that. It's not that it's cliquey, it's that they did the first part of the job, which is to be in a community where people see you be funny and see that you're easy to work with. And the other thing I tell these interns all the time, that there is zero tolerance for assholes now.
Totally. John used to say that all the time.
From the beginning, when you're an intern, if someone says, oh, you were an intern with this person, how were they? Like, great. One day, God, I was such a jerk. That's it. Then you don't get recommended. So you have to get it all out of your system in high school, or I don't know what, but you can't show up anywhere.
Unless you're going to be on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. There's no way to not find it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would also say you have to add to that community, clearly, the network morning show community.
Right.
Now that me and Jim Bell are running.
Yeah, they're all over the
shows.
place. They're taking over. We're not morning anymore. That's your new catchphrase.
These are all wild success stories. I am a cautionary tale at this point. We're still really in the throes of it, so I don't want to try to offer advice for something that I can't fully speak to. The one thing I will say is the no assholes policy is very much so enforced at ours. Out of the gate, I told all the agents that submitted people, I was like, absolutely no one that has an ego, no one that's not willing to, Bill Nye, at the show, Bill, if something was wrong, Bill would get on his hands and knees and just scrub the set. And that instilled such a beautiful, I was like, every talent should be that way to an extent. No job should be beneath you. Obviously, they shouldn't do it because they have more important things to focus on, but you know what I mean? It should be that ethos. For me, honestly, I have had an incredible amount of luck that I have way more tailwinds than I've had wins. And people like Chris have been generous enough to lend me their time. People like Michael Natus, people like Jim Margolis. For me, it's been about mentors and finding people that can just guide you in the right direction. And the mentors can be at every level. If you know a page or an intern at one of these shows, just get coffee with them and go, what is the environment like? For me, this world was so far away that I was just hungry to even know, what does the inside of the building look like? I just don't even know. I just don't. And it was just what
what people said about ours.
Yeah, but it was even the first time I came there, I was just this is this is crazy. This is, I don't know. It is this moment that you're whoa, how many freaking Emmys come out of just this room where they're just sitting on couches? It just grounds it in this sort of tactile, oh, this is real people work here. that's where the world I was coming from. And so for me, it's whoever is plugged in, just get coffee with them, pick their brain, go what, and work on your craft, and just keep trying to find people that are willing to give you their time. And for me, I still keep my
the form on my website open. You know, right now I'm getting a lot of Saudi hate mail, but but it's just like reach out, and like when these people have time, they'll reach out. Like people do want to help out, and I think that's been the most helpful is like when people make time for you. It's not, don't be afraid to ask for it.
Just in closing, I just want to say that all jokes aside, the reason why I was very excited about doing this panel is I've only been in this world for 2.5 years. And they say to be a good leader, you should be humble. There's nothing more humbling than coming into this community. And I think it's super important that the PGA get exposure to these kinds of people, because what you see up here and the staffs of producers that work for them are really amongst the best in the business. And it's a source of pride for the PGA. And I'm so grateful that you guys took the time on your Saturday. I hope it was informative. We managed to go the whole time without sort of the, how do you do late night in the world of Trump, and which you guys have heard 1,000 times, and I was hoping we could get into some stuff that's actually about producing. So hope you found it informative. It was really fun to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.